live I've done in a couple weeks. I've moved to a Monday morning schedule, so it's just a minute or two after 9 getting started. This is going to be a short video today, but what I want to talk about is a fairly serious video. I've been asking men that I've been meeting with that have been in my circles over the last week, how do we reconcile the very difficult things that people have to carry with the trauma that they represent? What I mean by that, if we find out that a loved one has a difficult and profound and maybe even life-threatening illness, how do we reconcile that? How do we reconcile the losses that people have experienced? Men who've been raised in families where they were the youngest child of a family that lost an older child before that person was born, meaning that there's sort of a ghost sibling in the family. How did the parents reconcile the tremendous loss that they had? How do we reconcile these very difficult experiences that we have to have? And it's interesting listening to how men respond, because there's a variety of answers. And I want to talk sort of meta, I want to talk about the structure of people's responses, because it reflects on how difficult it is for us to contemplate what this reconciliation looks like. And I want to say I'm aware that this is probably a topic that takes much more than just the few minutes I'm going to be able to give it this morning. But I want to just sort of start and suggest some ways to think about it. For instance, when I get back to the idea, the meta idea of how men are responding to it when I talk to them, one of the common responses is to talk about how they react to it, what they feel a need or an obligation or an opportunity is for their lives. So a lot of men will talk about, well, if they find out that somebody's dealing with something very difficult, they want to be part of that person's life. They want to support that person. They want to show love and make the burden easier for that person in any way they can. They also want to react by experiencing and really appreciating what they have to be grateful for in their lives. The idea that the difficulties in our lives, the trauma in our lives, make us more aware of the goodness in our lives. And I think that's a kind of reconciliation. You know, when I talk about reconciliation, I think of it, not a bad way to look at it is what we do with checkbooks, or what we do, you know, we reconcile debits and credits. We hold together and create some sort of unified understanding of these positive and negative forces in our lives. So one unified understanding is that it's an opportunity for me to be grateful for my own life. And I understand that, and I certainly support it, and there's always an opportunity for gratitude. I want to suggest that, does it really take trauma, either in our own lives or in someone else's life, to remind us to be grateful? I mean, yes, it does, unfortunately, but that's more on us. That's not as much a reconciliation as it is maybe a statement that we need to spend more time when the going is good to be appreciative that the going is good. It's kind of what I call the reverse foxhole mentality, you know, thank you, God, because my life is great. Not, if I get out of this alive, God, I'm going to dedicate myself to you, or I'm going to give charity, or, you know, it's this idea that we have an obligation to thank the universe, whatever force we feel controls the world, for the good things in our life when we're living well, when we're good, when things are positive. And yes, these negative experiences can be reminders and can emphasize how important it is for us to own the gratitude and be conscious and cognizant and present with everything that's beautiful and positive in our lives. But again, I think I come back to that is more of a reaction than a reconciliation. So let me suggest that one way for me, and it isn't a universal technique, it's not even a technique, I would say it's not even a universal approach, is often, or depending, and it's very situation specific. I think that's the reason it's not a universal approach. But when I receive some very difficult news about loved ones who are fighting potentially life-threatening illnesses. In some of the most recent instances, I come away with a sense of we're going to get through this. This person's going to be okay. That they're going to overcome it. That it's going to be an incredibly difficult and painful road. It's not going to be easy, and it's going to take time. But we're going to get out of this tunnel. That these people are going to come through on the other side, and they're going to be able to look. They're going to live to be able to look back at this experience, and maybe that's the simplest reconciliation we can come to, is that an understanding that life goes on, that that even when we've experienced terrible loss, we are able to come through to the other side. When I think about people I know who've had some of the most profound losses we can imagine, they have managed, maybe it's just one step at a time at times, but they have managed to continue moving forward with their lives. And they've been able to celebrate the good things that have happened in their lives, even while they may carry wounds that never fully heal. One of the things that came very present to me when I've been talking about this with men is that in a certain way, I'm very grateful that my parents have passed away. They lived their full lives. Their passing happened within the natural order of time. They didn't suffer terribly. And I have now been able to go through those experiences to understand what life is like on the other side of that loss. I've been able to see that life does go on, that I have come to understand my parents' lives and appreciate their lives in new ways that I never could have while they were alive. And I want to be very careful, because there are two things that we can fall into in our thinking. One is that, well, does the knowledge and growth that I've gained, because I now know what it's like to bury my parents, I know what it's like to be at this mature stage in my life, does that justify the loss? That's one challenge that I think one trap maybe that we fall into. And the other is that for people who feel like that their trauma may not be as significant as other people's traumas. For instance, if someone survived divorce as a child, they experienced divorce in their family, and at the time that was traumatic and painful, is that the same as losing a parent? And so the child of divorce may feel like he or she doesn't have as much right to say, oh, well, my life was made harder because of my parents' divorce. I think when we get into these discussions of justification or equality, or does my pain qualify as pain, or does it measure up to the pain that other people have experienced, I think that we're kind of missing the point, and I think that we're putting ourselves we're defeating ourselves. I think it's a kind of loser's game, in the sense that there's not going to be any winners, it's just a system to deny our own experiences. That the truth is my pain. I don't have to measure it against yours for it to be valid. And it doesn't have to be the end all and be all of pain for it to count. That I can have my own experience, whatever level that's like. And I think one of the things that cynically I see the universe has in store for us is that whatever we've suffered, there is the possibility there's going to be more. That life is difficult, that we do all have losses, and some of them are incredibly profound, and they and I think internally they can look differently for each of us, because each of us is going to go through it in our own way. Psychologists talk about general arcs of how we move through grief, and how we psychologically reconcile the trauma that we've experienced, how we learn to frame it in our lives and assimilate it, make our lives whole around the trauma. That's a fairly well defined and understood process or processes. But I think it all comes back to the idea that we have a right to our own process and our own experience, regardless of what the larger systematic or more well-studied arc may look like. We're going to hit our stops through that arc in our own way, in our own space and time. And so I'm going to just conclude right now by saying that we have our own experience. We have the right to our own experience. Our pain is our own pain. We don't have to measure or compare it next to anyone else, and it's valid as it is. That we I think in a lot of ways crave reaching out to others when they're in pain, and we want to be there, and that's a response to what we see our loved ones, the people that we care about going through, is to reach out to them, and I think that finally we have to. It's an opening up. That's all I can say. In my own mind, it feels like. Not a very conclusive process, but an idea that to reconcile a trauma is to find a way to make it fit into our lives, to live with it, to carry it with us and not ignore it, but to frame it in the context with other aspects of our lives. At least for me, that's how I've been able to move forward. And that externally, when I see what other people are going through or have gone through, I see that seems to be a way that they reconcile it as well. The pain exists. They may carry it with them forever, for the rest of their lives, but they're able to also wrap it within a larger life, and so not be defined by the trauma, but have it change them, and yet still move forward in ways that make their continuing life meaningful. I think that's a model of what healthy reconciliation to trauma could look like. Is it the only one? Certainly not. And is it easy? Certainly not. And can we do it alone? Certainly not. That's why I think those responses where we do want to reach out to other people is so important. Maybe because internally people are recognizing, without being able to articulate it, that for those who go through the trauma to be able to fit it into their lives, to create a life around it, they need help, and that we're there to help them. So maybe our response is kind of an implicit understanding of what reconciliation means, and that we're all standing ready to help those who are in pain, who have been wounded, who have had loss, move forward and little by little rebuild their lives. So thanks for watching. My next YouTube Live will be next Monday, YouTube and Facebook Live, 9 a.m. You can check out more of my YouTube and Facebook Lives on my YouTube channel, Mark Rothman Progress Coach, and of course on my Facebook page, Mark Rothman Progress Coach. And on my YouTube channel, check out other videos that are there. And thanks for watching.